One of the beautiful contributions to spiritual practice articulated within Jainism, found within the Tattvarta Sutra, commentated upon by so many scholars over the years, is called the path of the guna sthanas. And we're all familiar with the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, as well as the Eightfold Path of yoga tradition. But when I learned as a young scholar of this 14-fold path, I became quite intrigued, particularly because it filled in so many gaps in terms of the centrality of a defining religious moment, or I should say spiritual moment, that can be life-changing, but it's also very realistic. Some people devote themselves to the spiritual path, and some people just simply forget about it. Some people go to a certain point and they reach a plateau, and other people continue. Now I'm going to sketch this and invite you at different points of the way to regard it in terms of your own meditation. And then I'm going to tell a little bit of a narrative story of reality check as well as encouragement. Now, I want to re-emphasize the central importance of monasticism within Jain faith. I also want to assert the central role of the lay community, of family life within Jain tradition. And two great meditating communities of Northeast India, the area around Benares, a bit to the north, the south, the east, and the west, flourished simultaneously. Buddhism came a few hundred years after Jainism was well established. And a difference between the two traditions is that whereas Buddhism required utter strict monasticism, first men only, and then eventually women were provided entry to the monastic life. In Jainism, the path always included both. Lay people doing their best and living a life defined by these 5 great vows, and the monastics with greater prestige generally, and greater numbers of women always than of men, providing the edge, providing the extreme example of what is possible in a life defined by adherence to the vows. But whether a lay family or an individual seeking to follow the monastic life, it all begins with the dawning realization of what is called samyak drishti. This means sort of the correct view. And the correct view is the view that says, the soul, the life, this vigor, this purity, the heart of hearts, this is the way in which life can be experienced at its best. And the only thing that gets between me and that place of energy, consciousness, and bliss is karma. And it's said that in the life of a spiritual aspirant, there will be a spontaneous experience lasting a muhurta, lasting 48 minutes, where one gets a glimpse of what it means to be totally free. And if we think back I'm thinking of Fowler's stages of human development. If we think back to our childhood, quite often we will be able to find a moment of reverie, usually taking place within nature, where a silence sets in and we get a glimpse of what it means to be totally free. As a child, I would wander the fields and forests in back of our home, and I would just listen to the birds. I would just revel in this boundless beauty of nature. And it set me up for a life in love with that feeling. And it set me up to find a path, to find a way, to find a meditation for myself, an asana and pranayama practice that allows me a morning setup of a blessed return to that very specific feeling. And by building a life around that, as a layperson, I have managed to find a commitment to adherence to these vows, a commitment to ongoing processes of discernment, a commitment to build a life grounded and rooted in attentive awareness. So in the big picture of things, I have started with a number 4 level of spiritual experience, and then brought it, if I were to check in with one of the many acharyas who have devoted their entire life, they might say, oh, you might have gotten to about 6 or 7, maybe 8 on a good day. Some people will have that same blissful moment, what in Christian theology is called an epiphany, and immediately forget it. If you were to ask a grown-up who is all involved with things of the world, they'll look at you quizzically. What do you mean, some childhood moment of happiness? I'm living my life and I'm doing what I'm doing, and I don't want any of that spiritual hoo-ha. And those people will have slipped from that forth, hoping that it did happen, and I have confidence that it does happen, all the way down to an utter return to ignorance. Some people will say, oh yeah, I think I remember that, but it doesn't matter. And they will slip down to maybe level 3. And some people will sort of have a stirring out of that baseline ignorance, which is level 1, with an inkling that there might be something, but they will have neither the memory nor the inclination to make it their lifestyle. So what happens for people, lay people, monks, nuns, who have been informed by this awakening within the heart, is that they will build a life grounded on the 5th gunasthana, to a commitment to nonviolence, to truthfulness, to not stealing, to sexual propriety, and to a minimalization of possessions, so that they are moving along on the path of purification. And those who start to get it, who are able to, most of the time, adhere to these lofty principles and practices, they will make it to stage 6, and they mess up. Okay, they'll get angry, they'll get gluttonous, they'll be very, very human, but they have their conscience with which they will check in and say, in my heart of hearts, how am I doing? And then at stage 7, that conscientization process, that rising into a place of ongoing reflection and discernment will begin to become the go-to. And then a moment will come. It's called Apurvakarana, the 8th Gunasthana, where you're able to act at all times in the present moment, where that grip of the gross aspects of your past conditioning, your samskaras, your vasanas, where that loosens. And in yoga language, you move from the vitarka realm of cogitative, checking in, engaging, checking up on oneself, always striving to master the physical obstructions toward pure consciousness and pure awareness and mindfulness. And then you're beginning at the levels of 9 and 10 to sort out what in yoga is called the vichara aspect. Discernment through states of deep and profound meditation of those underlying motivations, parental patternings, past life patternings that still vibrationally cause obstruction. And if you get them to a place of pride, and you sort of try to own, like, oh, I know really why I do what I do, and I could tell you about my past lives, and I know I'm in charge now, it will place you on number 11. And if you get stuck on number 11, you're in a place of pride. You're in a place of trying to own your spirituality and sort of pulling off, oh, I am pure, listen to me. And that pride will be your downfall. So many gurus, and we all have stories, have found a little bit of that spiritual power and then put it into a place of abuse that brings them down all the way, if they're lucky, to number 4, like, oh, I better start waking up again. But even from the lofty height of number 11, it's possible to go all the way down to that state of utter ignorance. And there's a game, children's game, we all know it, Candyland, Chutes and Ladders. These games are modern versions of traditional games that have been played, snakes and ladders, beautifully arrayed on tapestries, played through all parts of India, the karma game, where you learn, you advance, but then you fall down. But if you're able to resist the temptation of pride, you can skip from state 10 up to state 12, where you are really able to dwell, still living within the human body, still with having vestiges of human presence, on the verge of that place of total freedom. And for the Tirthankaras, such as Parshvanath and Mahavira and Adinath, the very, very first Tirthankara, they broke through into stage 13. They broke through what in later yoga traditions is called Jivan Mukta. They broke through into the Gunasthana of active engagement, continued engagement with the world, but from a place of no clinging. So that even though they still have body, they still have form, they still have voice, they still continue to teach, in the case of the Tirthankaras, for many, many decades. But when that final moment comes, they go to the Gunasthana, the level of spiritual attainment, known as yoga. No connection, ascending to the Siddhaloka, ascending to that blessed place of eternal awareness, that place of eternal energy, that place of abiding bliss. And that Siddhaloka, according to Jain faith, is a real place. And we direct our intentions up to emulate those who live in this blessed place beyond heaven. And it's not about being good, it's about being beyond good and evil. And by even imagining what it would be to be eternally free, to be eternally alone, yet alongside the company of others who are also free, to be simultaneously in Kevala, aloneness, and in moksha, freedom. This is the goal of the path and the contemplative journey of Jain faith. So I'm going to lead us through a brief meditation, and you may want to return to it, where first you take a little bit of memory of a moment. It need not be as long as 48 minutes, but a moment in your life, either from childhood or a moment of just complete, unbounded connection with something beyond the littleness of your karmas, where you've experienced pure presence. And then walk with me imaginatively into a space where that pure presence, that pure awareness, perhaps of a beautiful tree, perhaps of a lovely animal, perhaps of a child or a destitute person in need of protection. Where that connection has led to an opening of your heart so that you commit it yourself to a way of life that seeks protection and no harm for others. And then walk a little bit further imaginatively and recall the substratum of your psyche, the constellation of karmas that interfere with your capacity to serve, that interfere with your capacity to connect with that feeling of pure presence. And merely note, merely observe, merely be honest in reflecting on work needed to be done. And then let yourself smile. Let yourself give it all up. Let yourself give up even your pride. And imagine, as with the Bhagavad Gita, that in your life circumstance, you are able to simultaneously honor your self of selves and be of assistance to all those many lives that surround you. all those many lives that actually support you. And then with a smile of benevolence, a smile beyond any form of clinging, imagine yourself in a place of great energy, in a place of greatest awareness, and in a place beyond any simple form of happiness, a place of great bliss. Jai Jinendra, Jai Jinendra, Jai Jinendra.